Hello viewers and welcome to the morning programs, the Dailies on Equa Television International, where we look at various stories that are trending on our Nigerian newspaper, and the conversation still on why governors have been using the allocations that is supposed to go to the local government is still making the headlines on our papers this morning. So we'll implore you to please sit tight and also follow us up on our social media handles. You can also share and follow, and also, drop your comment or contribution on any of the story that you feel is of interest to you, because we really love to hear from you. I remain your host, Sela Elisha Dasham, and I have with me Rachel Tanzi. Good morning, Rachel.
Morning, Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm fine, thank you. So I challenged you yesterday to the Christmas colors.
I just tried my best today.
Oh yeah, you did your best actually. Well, we shall be going through the papers, and Rachel will take us on the first paper this morning.
On the Voice of Liberty, I will conquer the ocean in Bayelsa as I did in Lagos. This is a promise from Tinubu for the 2023 election. High Court orders arrest, remand in prison of Army Chief Farouk Commandant Tradok Mina over contempt, and this is in Niger. Dezeni gave politicians $150 million to compromise 2015 polls. This is coming from the EFCC on 2015 electoral corruption. And the big story, how governors steal federation account allocations meant for local government. This is coming from Buhari. President Muhammadu Buhari has accused some chief executives of encouraging corruption in the local government system, thereby inhibiting development at the grassroots. Still on the Voice of Liberty, we are coming for your talk. NSA warns governors obstructing opposition campaign. This is on national security. No governor has power to stop opponents from campaigning. This is from the Inspector General of the Police. Failed Alpha Bank Managing Director Jimmy Lawal out as Abuja court affirms Adebutu as PDP candidate. And at the downside of the paper, this is coming from Aisha Buhari. Plans to begin nationwide protest on Monday. And that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
Richard, I'd like us to talk a little on this big story, how governors steal federal allocations, federal account allocation meant for local government areas. Yeah. Even though I know we touched a little, or not really a little, but then we talked about it yesterday on the fact that the only way forward is looking at the local government autonomy. Yeah. Now, the question that have been going through my mind, and I believe Nigerians are also having the same thought going through their mind, is the fact that, is there a way we can actually make it compulsory for states to actually make sure they sign in this local government autonomy? Because I believe that that is the only way we'll be able to have local government chairmen and councillors having what rightfully belongs to them. Of course, we're having the likes of even Wike saying that he's being attacked by the southern governor, saying that he is using the money for the flyovers, because yesterday on the papers we saw where it was being said that instead of developing and elevating the poverty rate, they are actually busy building airport and flyovers. And we said we are not on the ruling the fact that that is not important. Of course it is important. You need the road for transportation, we need the road for farming, we need the road. We cannot just rule out the fact that this road and flyovers are important. But then I need to look at, if the federal government is actually accusing the governors of using the federal account allocation that is meant for the local government, why is it coming at a time like this when this present administration is actually passing out of power? Why were the governors not called to check? Why were they not called to order earlier before now? Because later on when we go through, we'll see that there are certain allocations that have been given to them. We remember in the past paper, we've been seeing the Paris Club reform that was the back and forth for the governors to actually have their money for them to be able to develop things in the various states. And we know the governors kept championing all of that they need their money. And the money finally came in. Now, it's left for us to know what are each of the states doing with their allocation, in as much as we know that there are certain states that are more developed than the other, because of what we're looking at, industrialization that is going on, commercial and all of that. Yes. Like the likes of Lagos, Kano, we know those are like working, and also will I say the labor market over there is waxing stronger than other parts. But then I think this is not or even though it's the right time, but then I feel that it's a little bit late, because I believe this governor should have been called to order earlier before now. Even though we know that the local government autonomy was just this year that we had the, the signing it, because the constitution was being amended. But, questions are, is there a way we can make most of the states to sign this? Because we know that very few states, not even up to 25 states, have signed in this local government autonomy. And that is the only way. We still want the local government chairman to still depend on the state governors. And then we know that even when they are going to be given this local government autonomy, they cannot sign more than 500,000 in a day. But that is better than not signing anything at all. So I'm just hoping that in as much as the federal government and the ministers are actually being very sad about things that are happening in the local government areas, if there is a way that they can make the House of Assemblies in these various states to do something about this by signing this into law, that is the only way we'll be able to have that the local government are independent on their own, and they can stand and do certain things in their own, category.
The problem we keep having in Nigeria is that we sit down, we're watching a problem, we know it is a problem, we do nothing about it until it becomes too big for us and it looks almost like a difficult situation, whereas it shouldn't be a difficult situation in the first place. And I feel one of the things that is making this a big deal is maybe because of the recent reports that are coming, that we know that the majority of the poor we had, where over 50% of the population of this country are poor, 133 million the last time we saw, and majority, the highest percentage came from the rural area. And I want to believe that these are some of the reports that do spark up things like this. You now wonder, why is it that the majority of the poor people in Nigeria are coming from the rural area? Then you realize that it's because they've been neglected all this while. And I want to believe that, just as you said, concerning making things compulsory in this country, when we talk about the government and our system and our laws being restructured, these are some of the things that need to be restructured, because when we have this local government having the autonomy and the authority to do things, it means that there has to be a bill and a law passed and making it mandatory for every state to adopt it. Is no longer a question of do you want to or do you not want to, because we've seen it as a solution. So what do you do about a solution? You implement it. You don't make it an option. You don't give room of do you want to or you don't want to. There shouldn't be room for making it an option, but let it be implemented. And it boils down to every other thing in this country. I remember mentioning that, why are we not having a bill where if a present administration starts a mega project for development in the country, let there be a bill that says whatever is the next administration coming in, regardless of the party, you continue until we reach a 90% or even 100% achievement of that project. Then before your administration can start another big one and the next one comes. So we need continuity in our system of government, and this is one of the restructuring that is important. Let it not be made as an option for these states whether to adopt it or not. But we can see that that's the only way the local government can develop on its own, is if they're being given autonomy. So why should we put it as if it's an option for the states to choose whether to adopt it or not? Let it be passed into a law that should be implemented, that, you know what, there are certain allocations that goes to the local government, and as a governor, it is your duty to see that it goes to them. And if it doesn't, meaning the local government chairman now have the power and the authority to raise the alarm and say, okay, this thing was meant to come to us, but it didn't. And then that will be looked up to. So I believe when we want to restructure Nigeria, there are things that are not supposed to be an option of whether or not, as a governor or a state, if you want to adopt it, but I feel a compulsory thing just for us to grow.
Of course, so I just hope that this rule of law and also, separation of power, that we know that the state government should depend on what they should actually stay on their lane to do what they're supposed to do at the state level, while we look into the local government. We're not saying that the local government will definitely have issues where we see some chairmen trying to, trample on their own, indigents over there. But then to some level, we'll be able to checkmate that, and we will know that at the end of the day, all that is needed will go to the right sector. Well, let's move further to New Telegraph newspaper, we have the LCCI predict the first quarter of 2023 recession as insecurity pre-election threat to hit the FDIs. And then you can read more of that on the front page. What will befall us come the first quarter of 2023. And we hope we do something to avert recession from coming up the second time. And we know the way forward. I keep saying that if Agric have actually spared us for like not just once but twice, I hope that we'll do something, you know, inject more money, give attention to that sector, and also look at other, you know, natural resources that we have, so we can be able to avoid this recession that is being predicted come 2023 first quarter. Other story here coming from OPEC, we have oil production down by 710,000 barrels per day in November. We're happy that it's coming up now, it's going down again. So you can follow up that story on page 5. Other story here on the first scarcity, 2 billion liters of petrol available now. This is coming from the NMPCL, and it's just one thing for it to be available, but it's another thing for it, for, you know, commuters and also motorists to, you know, actually have access to it, because the queues are really mind-blowing if you see it. So I hope that we'll do something about that. NSA to governors, no hiding place for talks obstructing opposition campaigns. And Wike to the South governors, you asked minister to insult me with flyover comments. Salary arrears will be paid. Also, DK assures ASU members. You can read more of that story on page 2. The big story says 2023 censor freak with corruption, nepotism. This is coming from sources. Said management spent 1.8 billion naira on stakeholders meeting. As commissioners, chairman aide sprung staff function, allegations not true. This is coming from the National Population Commission, and I hope they do more. This is not the first time we're having this story coming up on the paper, so we hope that an auditing will be done. They will follow up and also probe to be sure if really they spend this money, and then they should give account of what they did with the money at the end of the day. On 2023, we have Nigerian's presidency not for Tinubu. This is coming from Baba Ahmed, accuses the APC and the PDP of promoting falsehood against Obi. Nigeria will be Nigeria without Bayelsa. This is coming from Tinubu. You can read more of that on page 2 and 3. Coming from Oshun, INEC produces illegible docs as a delicate certificate. And we have an Arebe Sola, why passport applicant face challenges. You can read more of that also. Governor stunting rural development by stealing council funds. This is coming from President Muhammadu Buhari. Nigerians not okay. He said Nigeria not broke, not planning debt restructuring. Federal government as releases for 2022 capital project hit 1.7 trillion naira. NEC to update the financial bill with inputs from governors. Nigeria underperforming at world stage. This is coming from Obasanjo, says we can't blame God but ourselves. Padding 206 billion naira meant for military equipment. Humanitarian Affairs Minister said that. And she said the padding minor mistake coming from the Permanent Secretary. Troops recover stolen crook orders worth 471 trillion naira in 2 weeks, coming from the Defense Headquarters. Downside of the paper, we have a study that said plant-based diet will reduce colon cancer risks. And so if you're interested, you will read more of that on page 26. That's all on the New Telegraph.
On the First News newspaper, some CBN MPA workers earn bigger salaries than Buhari. This is coming from the RMAFC chairman. G5 comment, Chief Justice of Nigeria must resign, 52 Northern. Aisha Buhari says NANS embarks on nationwide protest on Monday. 13% derivation arrears, Wike launches fresh attacks on Niger Delta. And we have the big story revealed, how governors pilfer local government allocations. This is coming from Buhari, cites personal experience involving unnamed governor. The writer says accuses governors of remitting only half of funds allocated to council chairmen, pocketing the balance. And we have on the tribunal, INEC presents blurry Adeleke's testimonial. This is coming from Ayatollah. Still on campaigns, restrain your talks now. The National State Assembly warns governors. Adeleke Ayatollah disagree over Osun debt profile. And at the downside of the paper, poor people's money tweet. Aisha Buhari to testify against student. Labour Party sacks Peter Obi's DG, Okupe and 10 others. Ogun 2023 court dismisses Lawa's suit, affirms Adebutu as rightful PDP candidate. Another African side, Morocco roar past Canada into World Cup last 16, and that's all the news on First News.
On the Punch newspaper, governor stealing local government funds, says Buhari. Nuge backs the president. You can read more of that on page 2. Politicians behind attack on INEC facility. This is coming from Jega, and I hope that if really politicians are behind that, then I hope that they will be brought to book, that the rule of law will have its place. Stop using talks, NSA warned governors. And we have the fuel queues grow longer after federal government sufficiency claim. More of that can be found on page 34. Still on federal allocation, oil producing states borrow 1.3 trillion naira and meet the 6.4 trillion naira windfall. The writer say PANDEV asks other Niger Delta governors to showcase development projects. Oil producing states receive 1.9 trillion naira as derivation fund under Buhari, coming from the minister. And we have 13% derivation include the NESPADEC fund, money judicial spending, says Delta. So you can read more of that on page 31. Picture story here, we can see queues of vehicles at the NNPC filling station in Ogun State yesterday, and this is really trouble, for us. And we hope that with the 2 billion naira liters of fuel that will be made available, we'll be able to reduce this queue to a large extent. Still on the Punch newspaper, Oyetola Adeleke disagree over 76 billion naira unpaid salaries and pensions. From the human angle, we have cultists shot the ex-student dead in Yapa Tech, suspect NAP. That you can find also on page 4 and 5. The last story, which is on most of the papers this morning, is on the issue of NAS planning a protest, tweet not critic. That's concerning Aisha Buhari. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Daily Sun newspaper, IPOP court orders police, DSS, army to fish out killers of aides to Kano's lawyer. Aggrieved landlords petition president, demand compensation over second Niger bridge. And the big story, Buhari brand governors thieves over local government funds. The Rider States accuses them of stealing council monies, remitting half of allocations, stifling rural development, and you can read all of that on page 6. Akwa Ibom Senator Guba candidate jailed 42 years. Ex-Guzau Varsity VC backs 32 years for fraud, and both stories can be found on page 4 and 29. Religious leaders list conditions for peaceful polls. The writer says warns of consequences of insecurity. Drama at Osun Election Tribunal as INEC tenders blank documents as Governor Adeleke's certificate. Nigeria not broke, says 5.03 trillion, $3.4 billion disbursed to support states in 7 years. This is coming from the federal government, and you can read that on page 6. We don't hold Tinubu's health condition against him. This is coming from Dati Ahmed. And the writer says, blast Shetima over comments on Obi, condemns violation of peace accord, and that can be found on page 26. At the downside of the paper, we have security agents will soon go after political talks. That story can be found on 27. And we have a picture story of scenes of the accident on Oledola Bridge, Beja, Lagos yesterday, and that's all the news on Daily Sun.
On the Blueprint newspaper, we have the letter man. I will continue to write letters. Don't believe it's outdated. This is coming from Obasanjo. The writer following on there says, we get away with stupid things because God is a Nigerian. Ex-President and Egima, this is coming from Kuka. I never had his permission to write, coming from Moji. That's the book author. You can read more of that story on the front page and inside the paper. Still, the big story here says governors, local government chairman pocketing council's allocation, coming from Buhari, urges public office holders to be guided by their conscience. Nigeria not broke. Federal government gives state 5.04 trillion naira, coming from the finance minister. Says borrowing debt payment sustainable, no need for debt relief. And we can read more of that on page 6. I'm actually finding it very fascinating when the finance minister said Nigeria not broke. I remember vividly when the Senate president said we are broke. We should not deceive ourselves. So, you know, coming from public figures like this, where we have the Senate president saying we're broke, we have to borrow to be able to have infrastructures. We need to borrow to do one or two things in the country, and we're having the finance minister saying we are not broke. I remember vividly too, during the Naira redesign, the finance minister came and said she is not aware. Meanwhile, part of her cabinet were part of those who actually redesigned it. So when you begin to have conflicting stories coming from, you know, public figures, you begin to wonder, then how do you get to give us some of the reports you give us, and how do they make it to the papers at the end of the day? But above all, I will stand to also say we are not broke. All we are lacking is we do not have the initiative, we lack the leadership, and corruption is eating us deep and deep every day. And no wonder we're having these figures coming up. You begin to see Nigerians are broke. I wonder, a country that have crude oil, a country that have lots of natural resources, a country that have a very good atmosphere for agriculture, what then do you lack when you begin to see lots of your indigents and your citizens are broke? And they're actually living a very, very deplorable life. So I hope that we come together and see it's not about if the councillors are eating the money or not, but just like we say, there should be a bill, there should be a law. And at the end of the day, Nigeria need to realize that you are the bosses, not this politician. You elect them into office. So they are meant to be your servant, to serve you. But then when you don't hold them accountable, you give them the right to do whatever they feel like doing. Why? Because they are not being, you know, being checked, they're not being brought to order, they're not being asked for accountability of certain things. So I hope that we realize this as we walk towards the 2023 election, that the power lies within us. All we need to do is ask accountability from your leaders. When you vote anybody into power, it is the responsibility of that person to tell you everything he or she does with the money. Maybe we need to start having town hall meetings, not just for debate, but for you to give us accountability of what did you use the money that was being given to you. I think with that, we'll keep our leaders on their toe, and they will do the right thing that's expected of them to do at the end of the day.
For me personally, I totally agree with the Senate president that we are broke, because practically it's only a broke person that borrows money. So I don't know why the finance minister is saying so.
We're broke yet we fly on private jets.
Yes, we are. We are borrowing money to do all of those things now. Like, we know that that's where we borrow the money to do all of, to live the luxury, to pay salary and all of that. Do we have what it takes to not be broke? Yes. But at the moment, I think we are, just for the fact that we keep borrowing to finance everything we do as a country, says that we don't have the money. And it's obvious, because I don't want to believe that if we have the money, we'll go and borrow. There's no how I have 100,000 in my bank account. I will call somebody and say, please, do you have 10,000 naira? Help me with it. It doesn't make sense. Logically, it doesn't make sense. So it means we might have some kind of money, but not enough to sustain the country as it is now. That's why we keep borrowing. So yes, we have everything it takes. There's no doubt Nigeria has everything it takes to be debt-free, to be a country that is thriving and growing. But the fact that we even have unemployment says that we are broke. Do we have appropriation of funds? Yes, we do. But then do we still have enough, even if it was done properly, to do everything? No, we don't. That's why we will keep emphasizing on the fact that, you know what, let's boost our economy, because we have oil theft that is bringing down our oil production. Already it means we are making less as a country. That's one fact there. What about our agriculture? We are having food scarcity. The flood came and it's destroying everything that we thought we could have this year. So we are struggling as a country. That's the truth. But we have everything it takes to stop struggling. So I just hope that the government works on trying to make sure that Nigeria doesn't struggle because we have everything it takes.
All right, I mean, we have come to the agreement that we actually have what it takes, but then we look forward to having good leaders that have the foresight to see that
Yes.
we can actually make something productive out of the sector. Why don't we inject so much energy, money into the sector so that we can be a debt-free country? Just like I said, it will be funny when you go in a private jet to ask the country to borrow you money.
Exactly.
They ask you a question, how comes you can afford this, yet you are living a very luxurious life? So we look forward to that too. Still on the Blueprint newspaper, on 2023 polls caution your talks, NSA IGP1 governors. Bayelsa will achieve oil bank potential under my watch, coming from Tinubu. Senators' wives killed, the gender bills, husbands burn it. This is coming from Olujimi. And we have another story that says, again, Adeleke reverses self, says sack of monarchs, workers stand. NNPC secures $1.4 billion funding for Kulmani oil field development. Coming from Zamfara, police arrest 6, rescue 15 kidnapped victims, and we need to give it to our police. They are really doing their best, doing very well. And we have detained student Aisha Buhari to testify in court. NAS threatened protests, and we hope all of this will be ironed out as soon as possible so he can get back to school. Because he's supposed to have his final year exam December 5th. So we hope whatever the issue is concerning all of this tweet, it will be rectified and he can actually further with his mates. Atiku blames APC for Nigerians' present predicament. Troops kill 54 terrorists, 690 million naira from collaborators. And we have the picture story where we can see during the book launch, we have the former President Obasanjo there, Kuka, and other stakeholders. So you can do yourself well, grab the Blueprint newspaper, read any of the stories that is of interest to you.
On the Nation newspaper, court orders arrest of Chief of Army Staff Commandant. Tribunal rejects Adeleke's WAEC GCE certificate. GTP quote to close on positive note, says LCCI. 13% derivation, attack me if you can, weaker class colleagues, and that you can be found on page 5. We have YPP governorship candidate jailed 42 years for graft money laundering. That can be found on page 5. And the big story on the Nation newspaper coming from the federal government, we supported states with 5.03 trillion naira in 7 years. The writer says Nigeria not broke, not defaulting in debt repayment. We are trying to reduce poverty, states say, and we are seeing a table that says what they got: 13% derivation, 1.978 trillion naira. We have Paris Club refund. We have $2.67 billion. Ecological fund, we have 20.4 billion naira. We have COVID intervention, 50 billion naira. Federal roads repair, we have 648 billion naira. Still on the Nation newspaper, how governors misuse council funds by Buhari. And we have a story that says Tinubu promises to industrialize Bayelsa, and I believe that there is a picture story backing that. And at the downside of the paper, 4 die in governor's convoy crash. Buhari warns governors using talks, and you can read that on page 3. And that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
Well, looking at that table, a lot actually, was being injected into the states. Well, we just hope we hold them accountable at the end of the day. Because looking at this money, in fact, that ecological fund is even 204 billion, not even 20.4.
Yeah.
So you could see that lots of money have been injected. So all we're asking right now is accountability coming from the various governors. What did you do with this money? We still have lots of states that civil servants have gone without salary for over 5 months. So what do you say of such a state where civil servants do not even get their pay at the end of the day? Yet they are in the state government, and they're not even talking about civil servants at the local government area. So you see, a lot needs to be done. So all right now, at this point in time, I think Nigerians need to hold their leaders accountable for every money that is being given to them at the end of the day. Let's take a look at the Daily Independent newspaper. Federal government not seeking debt relief, restructuring, coming from the finance minister, says Nigeria not broke, has not defaulted in debt services. Passengers traveling to Abuja abducted in Kogi. This really is a sad one, so you can read that on the front page and also page 4. Big story, governor's treatment of local government despicable, coming from Buhari, says governors pocket money meant for local governments, give them peanuts. Court notifies Abia, Apga, Guba primaries, others fresh elections, says Adebutu remains Ogun PDP Guba candidate. Adeleke inherited 76 billion naira debt in salaries and pension coming from the Osun government. We are not owing salary arrears, says Oyetoda's aide. So we have a back and forth from the past administration and the present administration. So you can read more of that on page 6. Guba candidate jail I take that story. Guba candidate jail 42 years for graft and money laundering. APC PDP fabricating falsehood against Obi, says Dati Baba Ahmed. Accuses Shetima of consistent, unguarded, uncultured outbursts. And we have launched manhunt for those who burned the INEC office, coming from the NSA. Warns politicians against stifling opponents' campaign. Downside of the paper we have from the MD of Aero Contractors, says why no airline has posted profit in 30 years. So for those who have been wondering why our aviation system is not doing well, you can do well, grab the paper, there's the Daily Independent, and read that on page 29. We have a picture story too on the front page of the paper, so you can actually, pick up that paper and read more of that story. But before we move further to other papers, we would like to take a break at this moment. We have said a lot this morning, and the papers have quite interesting stories, so we'd love you to chew them and actually drop your comment on any of the story that is of interest to you this morning. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, the program is the Dailies on Echo Television International, and we've been looking at lots of stories on the paper, especially looking at the federal location money that have been sent to the local government, but tend to be with the state government, and the federal government is really frowning on that. So we'd love you to actually drop your comment. What do you feel about that? And also, the finance minister said Nigeria is not broke. Are you actually in the same view with her, or do you have a different opinion? We'd love to hear that also from you. I have with me Rachel Tanzi. She's here with me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Yeah, before we move to the papers, we have some comments that were actually dropped on our Facebook page, and I'd like to take the first one. This is coming from Enoch Philip Dabu, and he said, very impressive. Thank you, Enoch. We have another coming from Moses Ishaku. He said, you guys are doing well, Equa TV. Keep up doing great works. Thank you. We have another coming from Moses still. He said, this present administration, they just want to make things complicated for the next administration by borrowing. They know what they are doing. Well, we hope that the federal government know what they are doing, and whatever the issue is, that will be sorted out, because this borrowing is really not, doing well with us as a country. So we hope we look into generating funds inwardly and also to stop borrowing. Well, let's continue with the newspaper review, Rachel.
On the Friday leadership, we have the big story ahead of 2023 elections. Security agencies put governors, politicians on watch list. The writer says NSA warns against using talks to disrupt opposition's campaigns, says election will hold as planned next year. Nigerians not God responsible for nation woes. This is coming from Obasanjo, our past leader, and if you want to know what he has to say, you can find that story on page 7 of the leadership newspaper. COAS, IGP, EFCC chairman all committed for contempt of court in 3 weeks. Dati Baba Ahmed wants Aisha Buhari's critic Aminu released. Still on Qatar 2022, Germany, Belgium out. Japan, Spain, Morocco, Croatia advanced to last 16. And you can read that for our sports lovers on page 30. We have President Muhammadu Buhari accuses governors of stealing local government allocations, and that can be found on page 4. And that's all the news on leadership.
Let's take a look at the world of business from Business Day newspaper. The big story: sole supplier, bad roads worsen petrol scarcity. Nigeria and others to unlock $26 billion on lower trade finance course. Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Senegal could earn up to $26 billion from lowering costs and increasing the availability of costs. So you can read more of that story on page 31. How Nigeria's free trade zone can attract more investments. Calls for federal government to rethink housing intensify on shrinking budget. Nigeria and others will be better off exporting finished goods. This is coming from the African Development Bank. And I think you said that it's not just enough for us to export goods, but then we need to export finished goods. That will actually, will actually attract more investors into the country, and then that will strengthen our naira and also help us to stop borrowing so that we can sustain ourselves to a large extent. So I hope that we do just that. If you want to know more of that story, check page 2 of the Business Day newspaper, and that's all on the Business Day.
On Nigerian Tribune, Adamu's tweet Nance plans nationwide protest against Aisha Buhari on Monday. Your comment on presidential breach peace accord, Dati tells Tinubu and Shetima. U.S. used to consult Nigeria before taking decisions on Africa. This is coming from Obasanjo. You can read that on page 19. And I want to believe that is no longer the situation now. If the United States of America, which we know are one of the world powers and leading economically and in various ways, used to consult Nigeria concerning issues in Africa, and then I believe that we are known as the giants of Africa. I want to believe when Obasanjo is saying something like that, he's passing a message to tell us that, you know what, we had a glory and we are no longer there anymore, because I don't think U.S. will come to us seeing that we cannot handle terrorism, we cannot handle inflation, we're always back and forth, moving from one place to another, borrowing and all of that. There was once a great Nigeria, and I believe that there still can be a great Nigeria in the future, where we truly can be the giants of Africa and not just a populous nation or a very famous nation, not just with a great brand, because Nigeria we are branding ourselves very well. But then when are we truly that big or great? We can be, we keep saying it, like we're not trying to pull Nigeria and our Nigerians say, but we are just saying things as they are. Are we struggling at the moment? Yes. Are we the giant of Africa? Personally, we've talked about this like weeks ago, and I was like, no, not at the moment, but can we go back to that glory? Yes, we can. So I want to believe that we can do, like we are looking forward to a Nigeria where world powers can come to us and ask, what do you think we should do about Africa? What do you think we should do about this country in Africa and stuff like that? And I believe that that day is coming soon, very soon.
Of course it will, Richard, and that lies with everybody. That lies with you. That lies with me. Our future is in our hands. We decide what we want to do with it at the moment. Just like you rightly stated, of course, they do consult us. I mean, South Africa cannot talk about them being independent without mentioning Nigeria.
Of course,
Liberia cannot talk about anything without mentioning Nigeria, because we helped them during the peacekeeping. So that is just 2 out of many other African nations that we have contributed immensely, like we've contributed greatly to where they are. So just like you said, we have all the potentials, but we need to look inward and see what went wrong, what is the problem, and how can we get it right.
True.
I think we shouldn't just beat ourselves and say, okay, we are the giant of Africa, and then we keep saying we are. Just like you said, it was a glory and we can still maintain that glory. So I look forward to that Nigeria.
True.
That Nigeria that I can sit my kids and tell them this was what things were, but this is how things are presently. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed and we hope for the best at the end of the day.
Best. Still on Nigerian Tribune, the big story: Buhari blasts governors over theft of local government allocation. States receive 5.03 trillion naira, $3.4 billion support under Buhari. This is coming from the finance minister, and you can read all of that on page 2. Despite arrest threat, we stand with Atiku, Rivers PDP supporters declare. Gunmen abduct travelers in 18-seater bus. Still on fuel scarcity, and NPC Alice Fair says 2 billion liters of petroleum in stock, and you can read that on page 16. And at the right side of the paper, Oyetola left 76 billion naira debt in salary pensions. This is coming from the Osun governor, and there is an answer, a reply that says we do not owe salary, and you can read that back and forth on page 28. INEC produces blurred copies of Adeleke's WAEC GCE results, and then we have court orders INEC to produce clearer, readable copies. Court affirms Adebutu as Ogun PDP governorship candidate. Police barred from carrying lethal weapons at polling loot, and that can be found on page 3. And at the downside of the paper, uneasy calm in Eri over Obaship tussle. This is in Osun. Security operatives weeks head of kingmakers away, and you can read that story on page 27. And we have a picture story of the queues in the fuel station, and I think this picture story was on most of our papers to see how bad it is at the moment now. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On Nigerian News Direct, Osun Tribunal drama as INEC produces blank document as Adeleke certificates. Tribunal threatened to invoke conciving order on INEC. Requests INEC to bring the whole file on Saturday. So you can keep your fingers crossed and read more of that story. The big story says on 2023 budget, LCCI knocks the federal government on proposed 10.57 trillion naira loan. Says debt servicing gulped 664.73 billion naira in the second quarter of 2022. Advocates higher production, export expansion to strengthen naira value. Seek better security, friendly policy to boost the FDI. Warns of job loss with high diesel price and poor power supply. That you can find on page 22. Afrivest Asset Management get 8.3 rating from the GCR Augusto and co-assigned A. You can read more of that also. Labour civil servant hail Kwara governor's commitment to workers' welfare. Senator Bassi jailed 42 years of money for money laundering. And we have a column where Femi Adesina said some things at the back of the page. So do well, grab the Nigerian News Direct, turn the back and read more. We have 2 picture stories too, so you can do well to read more of any of the story that's of interest to you.
On the Daily Asset, Nigeria not broke, says Finance Minister. The big story, presidency moves to avert bloody electioneering campaigns. NSA warns governors against obstructing opponents' activities. Police will deploy additional 10,000 personnel for polls. This is an assurance from the Inspector General of Police. Troops apprehend 5 bandit collaborators with 19.5 million naira in Katsina. National Revenue Service rakes 16 billion naira in 11 months. This is coming from officials. Labour Party seeks Peter Obi, DG Okupo, and 10 others. And you can read that on page 34 rather. NNPC Alice Fair of fuel scarcity says 2 billion litre in stock. Nigeria's free trade zone attract 46.4 billion investment. This is coming from the managing director, and that story can be found on page 3 of Daily Asset. Still on the Daily Asset newspaper, Benue APC Guba tussle, court strikes out Owondoka suit against Alia, and the writer says court dismisses Lawal's suit, affirms Adebutu as Ogun PDP candidate. I will appeal judgment. This is coming from Lawal. At the downside of the paper, 4 feared dead as Fenteries convoy crashes. And that's all the news on Daily Asset.
On the Vanguard newspaper, we have on 2023 Oshomole Atiku Okowa campaign organization at war over presidential poll that you can find on page 9. Aisha Buhari to testify against student over tweet. Court jail Senator Akpan 42 years over corruption. And we can see a findings that say the federal roads are debt traps. So you want to know more about that, you can read that story on page 14. And on 2022 budget, federal government releases 1.7 trillion naira for capital expenditure. Governors kick as Buhari accuses them of stealing local government funds. Autumn not stealing local government funds. This is Benway replying the federal government. Buhari accusation does not apply to us, coming from Kwara, Rivers, Ebonyi government. We don't tamper with local government funds. This is coming from Ogun government. Plateau treat local government fairly, gives them free hand to operate. This is coming from the government. I remember yesterday I said trust the governors. They have an answer waiting standby. We can see that Benway have replied. Kwara, Rivers, Ebonyi has replied. Ogun has replied. Plateau State has also replied. So I'm waiting to hear Adamawa. I'm waiting to hear from Bayelsa. I'm hoping to hear from Kano, Bauchi, and all of these other states if they are not. But then it's one thing for the governors to defend themselves. It's another thing for the citizens of that state to actually come out and say, truly, are we feeling the impact as a local government worker that I am, whether I'm working in local government school or in the council there, am I benefiting? So this is the people that actually have the right to respond properly, not the governors, because as a governor you can actually disburse the money at the end of the day, but how sure are you that it gets to them? Are you sure that your chairman did not step on the money? So these are some of the questions, and also I hope that it's not just about replying on the papers, but then that the indigents of that various state will be able to come out and testify that yes, we are benefiting, that our governor is not, actually tampering with the money at the end of the day.
Like the response from Benue, it wasn't Otom saying that, it was someone else saying it on behalf of the governor. So that's where the accountability comes in. Of course, if I'm being given money, I'll come out and say I didn't steal it. I'm not supposed to say it's true, what the president is saying. As the governor, I haven't done the right thing. Nobody is going to come out and say that. But who are the witnesses to if this money has been used properly is those at the receiving end. How have you been faring as a local government teacher, let's say? Have you been receiving your pays? Have you been receiving your bonuses, if any? You in the community, has the right development come to you as it should be? How are your primary health care centers? Have they improved 4 years ago from how it is? Have the government built more schools and all of that? These are the people that will come out and say, you know what, no, my governor in my state is doing a good job, and I want to believe that he has been giving the funds allocated to the local government properly, because I am in this community and I have benefited from all the projects that the government have done. So yes, it's not for the governors to come and defend themselves. We want the local government chairmen coming to say, no, the governor of my state has been giving me the allocation. We want the community people to say, you know what, we've been benefiting from this government, and so much improvement have come in for the past 4 years or for the past 8 years that this governor has been in power. Then that's when we can truly say, you know what, yes, these governors have been doing the right things, and perhaps there are those faulting, but we still have a good number of those that are doing the right thing.
Of course, Rachel. Well, let's look at other stories still on the Vanguard. Abusive campaigns, APC, PDP, Labour Party trade blames. That you can find on page 40. On 2023, still Dati Ahmed raises alarm over violation of peace accord. 260 million naira fraud court jails ex-Guzava City VC Professor Gerber, 35 years. And on political violence, rein in your talks, NSA tells governors. Troops intercept 15.5 million naira cash for terrorist bandit logistic being moved from Katsina to Zamfara. 5 persons confirmed dead on Governor Fitiri's campaign convoy. Still on 2023, blame Nigerians for its failures, not God, coming from the former President Obasanjo. From CBN, MPA, NCC, NAMESA, staff earned salaries bigger than Buhari. This is coming from the RMAFC boards. And I remember some weeks back where we had that there might be likely increase of salary for the president, the vice, and also the judiciary. So we look forward that in as much as you want to make a president and also other stakeholders comfortable, remember that you also need to make the civil servants and other workers in the state also comfortable. It's not about increasing the salary, but making sure that it goes around to everybody, because we all deserve to have equal rights in the nation, that you have the the same right as I do. So we look forward to more of that. So if you're interested, you can read that on page 9. We have a picture story here where we can see President Muhammadu Buhari and the Vice President. In the middle, we have the Director General of National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, Professor Ayo, who had participated in the Senior Course 44, present a report to the President at the State House Conference Center in Abuja. So you can read more of that story inside the Vanguard newspaper. And that's all on the Vanguard, and also how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this with me. Thank you to all those who dropped their comment on our Facebook pages. Thank you for those who have been following, and also pray with us. Until we come your way again, do have a blessed weekend ahead.